Hello, I'm LegenTerry and this is Wild Hearts. Wild Hearts was developed by Megaforce, a branch of Koei Tecmo Games, and published by EA under its EA Originals label. I won't lie, with the amount of high-profile games launching in the first quarter of this year, I almost set Wild Hearts aside to eventually, inevitably, get lost in the shuffle. But my history with the Monster Hunter franchise made me view this game through a slightly different lens than most other releases. It is almost impossible to talk about this game without mentioning its heavyweight rival, Monster Hunter. For context, I originally dove in with Monster Hunter Unite on the PSP, where I fell off very quickly. I had no guiding hand to lead me, and friends who weren't interested in learning the game's extremely draconic systems. I tried again on the Wii U with 3 Ultimate when internet culture seemed to catch on and take more of a notice of the series' cool creatures and deep combat systems, and with 4 Ultimate, Capcom finally managed to hook me and reel me in hard. I imported the Circle Pad Pro attachment for my base model Nintendo 3DS from Japan to make playing more comfortable, and eventually, I even upgraded to the sleek Monster Hunter 4 branded new Nintendo 3DS XL. And then, it finally happened, Monster Hunter World. I felt a little bit of pride as a veteran player as it finally came to home consoles and became the massive hit it rightfully deserved to be. I enjoyed Rise as well, but with both it and World, I dropped off after the initial grind through to the endgame content and didn't stick around for the expansions. It isn't bad content at all, I just didn't feel like my time would be respected as they continue to iterate on newer versions of the same game. Capcom has a very old habit of re-releasing expanded versions of games, and while for Monster Hunter that mostly just meant that the game was getting released in the West finally, they've never been shy with that practice. That's where Wild Hearts comes in. A clean slate with a lot to prove, and very little to lose. It's far from the first game to take a swing at the monster hunting genre, but it feels like the most likely to actually gain a foothold against its seasoned competitor. See, this game is a spiritual successor to Koei Tecmo's Tweak It In The Age of Demons, which was in the monster hunting genre itself. They already have the experience necessary to build this style of game because it isn't their first swing either. And they have the backing of EA, a giant entity with enough money to fund Megaforce's endeavors for quite some time if their cards are played correctly. But the question is, have they? Wild Hearts is, first and foremost, almost exactly what you would expect. The world's bones are Monster Hunter to a fault, both the attractive and the remarkably unwieldy elements left wholly intact. Unfortunately, the presentation of Wild Hearts isn't nearly as polished as it should be. With the amount of time Koei Tecmo has had to build this game compared to Capcom's roughly 20 years of experience, I wasn't expecting state-of-the-art graphical fidelity, but apparently my low expectations should have been a little bit lower. There's lighting mishaps, detail pop-in, and frame stuttering at every turn. The voice acting and direction is very haphazard, and the English dub commits the age-old sin of trying to incorporate occasional Japanese exclamations and idioms between every other line. There's a lot of eye-roll-inducing moments in dialogue where the characters feel compelled to remind you that Wild Hearts is set in an alternate universe version of Japan. You will hear sugoi and arigatou gozaimashita, and you will like it. It feels like attending an anime convention in the worst way. The animation quality is okay. The big movements which need to be animated well, like the tells of the kimono attacks and your own character's actions, they read just fine, but that quality definitely doesn't hold up in other cases. NPCs' faces were obviously animated using AI to make their words form mouth shapes, but it also feels like they may have used the original Japanese animations for the English dub. It's kind of weird stuff. NPCs will teleport around behind you rather than run when they're being escorted through areas, which looks hilarious in multiplayer. To be sure, this one's absolutely not a looker, so rather than punching down anymore, I'll just say that if your fun is derived from nothing but the joy of flawless visuals, this ain't gonna be it, Chief. The musical score by ex-Square Enix composer Masashi Hamauzu is an absolute blast to fight alongside. A lot of sweeping string of woodwind instruments with the occasional percussive sting make up the battle themes and keep the momentum and excitement rolling forwards at a breakneck pace. Each kimono's theme has 3 different versions that get interwoven based on whether you're fighting them, tailing them to a new location, or if they're enraged. Every now and then, I'd find myself just spacing out to the songs in the middle of the hunts and dodging around, forgetting to attack back. It's some really nice stuff here. The rest of the audio design is alright, just not anything to write home about. There were some questionable decisions made around the sound certain kimono made, looking at you flying squirrel doing its best dolphin impression. But it's kind of more endearingly funny than it is laughably bad. There was a pretty nasty bug that happened to me where everything besides the music cut out, but that only happened once in my entire play session. As far as the plot goes, it really doesn't do anything new. Here they call their monsters Kemono, and there's an extremely minuscule subplot about humans becoming samurai and fighting other samurai for resources rather than Kemono, who have become tougher prey over the years. I'm pretty sure this is just some background noise, and it will never come up again in the story. I just thought maybe I should include it in case it does. You begin as a traditional hunter tracking a Kemono through the mountains. As you follow it, you hear the sound of a shamisen in the distance and look for the source. That leads you to a person with a tail, wearing a wooden mask, who likes to speak in riddles. I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be a tanuki from Japanese folklore. After sitting by the fire, you talk to him and create your hunter's backstory throughout the conversation. You're then assailed by a troop of icy white wolves, and the man tells you that your mettle as a hunter will now be tested. Dispatching the wolves, you follow the snowstorm that preceded the group to their pack leader, a much larger and more dangerous Kemono. When your hunter's strength doesn't appear to be enough, your fight gets interrupted by the ground itself tearing apart, revealing that a piece of the mountain was a kimono the whole time. Just before blacking out, the masked stranger appears to you again and infuses your body with something called a karakuri seed, before leaving you to fend for yourself. The karakuri works as a kind of spiritual magic that can summon objects and machinery strewn together by a glowing teal thread from thin air. You escape your would-be tomb, find more troubled people to help, and with them in tow, eventually make your way to Wild Heart's major hub city, Minato. Most ideas in Wild Hearts were torn from the exact same cloth as Monster Hunter, almost like the developers were following along with a checklist of mechanics and elements to cherry pick. Yeah, if you haven't noticed yet, I'm going to be making a lot of Monster Hunter comparisons, so settle in. Beyond the surface level scope of being people fighting big monsters with creatively bonkers weapons, even most of the game's other systems were unashamedly lifted wholesale. There are main quests to progress the story and unlock new locales with new Kemono, side quests to get access to new items and upgrades to the town, and they're all bound to a star ranking to show their intended difficulty. You collect materials of varying rarity from Kemono to craft new pieces of armor and weapons, but the hardest materials to get coming from destroying specific parts of the Kemono in battle. The suite of initial weapons you get access to aren't too outlandish either, with the exception of the Wagasa umbrella, which functions as a cross between Monster Hunter's Insect Glaive and Lance. Besides that, you have your standard katana, longsword, your Nodachi greatsword, a hammer, and a bow. They all have their own unique tricks and functions to learn. After running down a bit of the campaign, you get access to a few more weapon types with a little more variety in their nuance. There's the hand cannon, which fires consistent heavy rounds and keeps you relatively stationary as you maintain a set of key bases to restore your ammunition. The karakuri staff, which transitions between several different weapon types to execute long combos and builds to a massive final swing, reminiscent of Monster Hunter's Charge Blade. And a favorite of mine, the Claw Blade, which sees you making swift attacks before attaching yourself to the monster via a tether to quickly maneuver through the air like a deadly acrobatic ninja. A really nice thing about Wild Hearts is that they trimmed off a lot of the fat that Monster Hunter ballooned with over its many years. Some of the basic systems, like eating before hunts, have been streamlined into just eating food whenever you want. Even better, some of the more antiquated and boring systems like sharpening weapons and crafting potions have been nixed entirely. Instead, health plants you can chug down bloom along pathways between fight locations. This means you spend a lot less time fiddling with your inventory menus, and you can jump right back into the fun parts of the game. The upgrade paths for weapons also gets a new and interesting update. Rather than straight lines leading you to predetermined upgrades, you can plot your own pathways around the skill tree and make your finalized weapon inherit skills from its previous forms. At first glance, that skill tree and the additional one for karakuri upgrades made me a little nauseous and gave me a serious case of choice paralysis. I mean, look at this thing. 6 full seconds of scrolling down to reach the bottom, and that's using the increased cursor speed. But once that shock wore off, I realized that also meant 6 straight seconds of scrolling worth of cool stuff to make even better. Hunts can be taken on in a group of people online when you can get EA servers in your system to cooperate, albeit at a smaller maximum size of 3 hunters rather than 4. This makes the difficulty scaling feel a little more focused in my opinion, though it kind of sucks if your group is coming from the other side, as someone's going to feel excluded. It's understandable when you start to reconcile with Wild Hearts' biggest deviation though, being the karakuri system. That's right, Wild Hearts isn't just Monster Hunter, it's also Fortnite. Well, the building part of Fortnite at least. Karakuri work kind of like a catch-all for building stuff in Wild Hearts, with some patterns operating as traps or artillery for fighting monsters, and others serving to make your traversal and encampments more robust. These devices are the heart of the game's experience. Your first few times trying to remember which buttons to press for which karakuri and wrapping your head around what each of their use cases is will undoubtedly feel clunky. My brain stopped functioning about 2 seconds after opening the menu trying to understand what the game wanted me to do with these boxes and springs. Why would I need a box to fight a kimono? Eventually, I started getting the controls down and realizing that you can essentially build your own arena around the kimono to suit your needs. Want to pull off a leaping attack? Craft a box and run forwards. Need to dodge out of the way of a fast attack from a kimono? Pull out a spring and use it to dash away. And that's not all. Eventually your character gets flashes of inspiration mid-combat, leading you to learn Karakuri fusions. These are major contraptions that can change the tide of battle, like using 6 boxes to form a bulwark that stuns enemies who charge into it, or stacking 3 springs to make the Pounder, a giant one-shot hammer that whacks whatever's in front of it for massive damage. Pulling up your Karakuri menu and timing their creation perfectly in sync with your opponent's actions hit levels of satisfaction I didn't anticipate. It's evident that all the kimono were designed with the idea that there are Karakuri fusions you can use to hard counter their abilities. If an enemy flies, you can shoot out of the air with a fireworks fusion. If it's weak to an element, you can make an element lantern to adjust your damage accordingly. To me, the Karakuri system feels like a welcome mechanical change in what was starting to become a pretty stagnant genre. When I first booted up Wild Hearts, I couldn't make heads or tails of it. Its premise was simple, its influence was obvious, and it kinda seemed like an unnecessary knockoff of an otherwise good franchise. Having now spent over 12 hours with it and giving it the time to gestate, I can appreciate all of the little things that make it stand apart. I had a lot of fun playing this game, after an admittedly lengthy learning period. If you're a fan of the genre and can weather a few ugly blemishes, I would say you should give Wild Hearts a shot.